Hi there. Welcome to our beginner lesson for EQ8. I'm Jenny from the Electric Quilt Company, and I'm excited to show you the software. Let's get started. When you open up EQ8, you'll see the home screen. The home screen helps direct you to the appropriate work table for what you'd like to do. We're going to design a quilt, so click Design a Quilt from Scratch. You'll be switched to the quilt work table with the new quilt tab selected. You can choose which layout style you'd like to use here in the ribbon. Click on a couple of different styles, and then you can read the tips about them here in the palette. For this lesson, we're going to stick with the basic quilt layout, so click on Horizontal in the ribbon. Then click the Layout tab at the top of the screen. Here in the palette on the left is where you can change the basic settings for your quilt. Change the number of blocks for both horizontal and vertical to 3. Click to put a check in the box next to Keep Width and Height Equal. Then change either the width or the height to 8 inches. You can highlight the number like this and type a new number, or you can use the slider bars, or if you're close to the number, you can click directly on this line of the slider and move it in increments. It's important to remember that in EQ8, you are always working in finished sizes. So when we set the width and height for this block to 8, that means that's the finished size of that block. When all of the seams are sewn, it will measure 8 inches square. Now that we've set our basic layout, let's go ahead and move to the Borders tab here at the top of the screen. We'll stick with the long horizontal border, which you can see is selected here in the ribbon, and you can also see that same selection here in the palette. Under Lock Size Adjustments, make sure that All is checked. Then change one of the sides to 3/4 of an inch. Click the Add button, and then you'll see that a second border appears around the quilt. For this border, we're going to set it to corner blocks, and we're going to change the size to 2.5. Now we can move to the Design tab at the top of the screen. Make sure that Block Tools is selected in the ribbon, and the Set Block tool is selected in the palette. The blocks that you see here are the default blocks that every project starts with in EQ8. We're going to grab some new blocks from the library for our quilt design. Click the Open Library button, and the block library will open. On the left, you'll see the block categories and styles. If you see a plus sign, like this here, that means there's more to see. So click the plus sign and you'll see styles below. Right now, I have a category selected. So over here it says no blocks to display. I need to click on one of the styles below to view the blocks in that style. Here we are in the O1 Classic Piece category, and now we need to click on Diamond in a Square. Click on the second block. This block is called Economy Patch, and you'll see that here at the bottom of the library window, and also if you pause and hover your mouse over the block, the name will appear. Click the Add to Sketchbook button. You'll notice that the block will disappear to let you know that it's been added to the sketchbook. This is only temporary. The next time that you visit this section of the library, the block will be back in its original place. Let's grab a few more blocks for this quilt design. Scroll down and look for a style name called Two Patch Patterns. It's right here. Click on the third block, which is called Roman Stripe 4, to select it. You'll see that blue outline around it to let you know it's selected. And again, click the Add to Sketchbook button. Next, click on Variable Stars on the left. And this time we're going to get the sixth block, which is this one right here, the Variable Star Variation. Click Add to Sketchbook. And those are all the blocks that we're going to get, so click the Close button to put the library away. And now we're back here on the Quilt Work table, and you'll see those 3 blocks that we added are here in the palette ready for us to use. If you have a smaller screen than I do, or if you have your view set differently, you may not see all of these blocks at once. So if you just see the default blocks, use the scroll bar below the blocks to move to the end, and you'll see the new ones that we just added. New items that are added to the sketchbook are always placed after the existing items in the sketchbook. So if you're looking for something, always scroll to the end to find the blocks or fabrics that you just added to the sketchbook. Click on the Variable Star Variation block. Notice we still have the Set Block tool selected up here. Move your cursor to the center space in the quilt and click once, and you'll see the block pop into the space. Now click the Roman Stripe block and click in each of the corner spaces of the quilt. Now we're going to scroll and find one of the default blocks. This one right here, the EQ default variable star. Looks very similar to the one that we set in the middle, but it doesn't have those half square triangles in the corners. So look for that default block and then set it in the last 4 places in the center of the quilt. Now we can set blocks in the borders too. So we're gonna scroll back down to the end, find that economy patch block, make sure it's selected here in the palette, and click on one of the corner block spaces to set the block. If you hold down the Control key or the Command key on your keyboard and click on one of those corner spaces, the economy patch will fill all 4 corners at once. Now that we've got our blocks set in the quilt, let's rotate these Roman stripe blocks. In the palette on the left, click the Rotate button. Each time you click on a block with the Rotate button, it will rotate it 90 degrees. So if I click once on this block here, you'll see that it turns once. Now I want to turn all of those blue triangles to the center. So for this block here, I have to click twice. 1, 2. And for the last block, I have to click 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Now that we've got a basic quilt started here, let's add it to the sketchbook to save it. On the toolbar on the left, click the Add to Project Sketchbook button. It's the red notebook with the blue plus sign. You'll see a message explaining that you're adding the quilt to the sketchbook, but the project file has not been saved yet. That's why it says Untitled at the top of the screen. Click OK. And in the Save As box that appears, type Basic Quilt Design Lesson. And then click the Save button. Now you'll see at the top of the screen that it says Basic Quilt Design Lesson rather than Untitled. Now let's add some fabrics to this quilt design. In the ribbon, click on Fabric Tools. Here in the palette, you can see the default fabrics that are loaded with every EQ8 project. You can use the scroll bar below the swatches to view them all. We can add more fabrics to the project too, just like we added blocks. Here in the palette, click the Open Library button, and the fabric library will appear. The fabric library works just like the block library. There are 3 categories that come with EQ8: colors, manufacturer basics, and themes. The other listings you see here are from add-ons that are available for EQ8. If you see a plus sign, that means there's more to see. So if I click the plus sign here next to colors, you'll see the styles appear below. Right now, I have a category selected, so it says no fabrics to display over here. If I click on one of the styles below, you'll see fabrics. Just like the blocks, you can click on a fabric and then click the Add to Sketchbook button and it will disappear. But the next time you come back to this style, that fabric will be back in the same place. Take a few minutes to scroll through the fabric library and add 10 to 15 fabrics that you'd like to color your quilt with. When you are done adding fabrics, click the Close button to put the fabric library away. The new fabrics have been added after the default fabrics, so drag the scroll bar below the swatches to see the new fabrics that you've added. Click on a fabric to select it, and you'll see that it appears up here in the window. If you click this Detach button right here, you'll get a separate little window to preview the fabric, and you can see a larger swatch of the selected fabric. If you'd like the fabric preview back in the palette, you can just click the X to close it, and it'll pop back over here. I'm going to detach mine so I have a bigger preview of my selected fabric. I can move it anywhere on my screen and keep it off of my quilt. I can make it smaller or larger. So it's handy to have over here in the corner. So let's start coloring this quilt. Make sure that you have the paintbrush tool selected over here, and it will color one patch at a time. So if I click on this large center square of the variable star block, it will color that one patch. There are keyboard shortcuts to make coloring faster too. You can hold down the Control key or the Command key, and it will color the center squares on all the matching blocks. So if I come up here and hold down my Control key or Command key on my keyboard and click on the center square here, it will color all of the center squares in the 4 variable star blocks. Remember, this variable star in the center is slightly different. It has the half square triangles in the corners, so that's why this one is not being colored the same as the 4 default variable star blocks. You can use the spray can to color as well. The spray can will color all matching patches in a block at once. I'm going to select a different color here in the palette, and if I click on one of the star points in this block here, they will all color at once because I have the spray can tool selected. So click once and all of my star points color at the same time. Now the keyboard shortcuts work with the spray can tool as well. So if I come up here to this star block and I'm holding down the Control key on my keyboard, or if you're on a Mac, you can use your Command key, and I will click once and you'll see the star points in all of the blocks colored at once. Take a few minutes here and color the rest of your quilt using whichever coloring tools you would like. And if you color a patch or a block by accident and you don't want it to be that color anymore, you don't have to remove that fabric first. You can just color over it with a different fabric. So take a few minutes here and color your quilt however you would like. When you are happy with the way that you've colored your quilt, click the Add to Sketchbook button on the left toolbar. Now let's take a quick look at where things go when we add them to the project sketchbook. Right below the Add to Sketchbook button, you'll find the View Project Sketchbook button. It's the red notebook with the glasses. Click that button, and the project sketchbook will appear. Here you'll see we have the quilts section selected. Below the quilts, you'll see the total number of quilts in this sketchbook. Right now, we're viewing the first quilt that we added to the sketchbook, which was just the solid colors. If we use the scroll bar, we can see the last quilt that we added to the sketchbook that has the fabrics. If you'd like to see more quilts at a time here in the sketchbook, you can choose one of these other view buttons. If I click the medium button, then I can see both quilts at once. Every item in EQ8 has a note card attached to it. This is the place where you can name your quilt and add some notes about it. With the colored quilt selected here, click the Edit Note Card button. On the note card, type a name for the quilt and any design notes that you'd like to save. When you are done typing your notes, you can click the X button. Now you'll see your note card information here on the left in the sketchbook as well. Click the blocks section on the left. And here you'll see the default blocks, followed by the blocks that we added. Block colorings are saved in stacks of 2. So, depending on how you've colored your blocks, you may see multiple copies of the same block colored in different ways. Click the Close button to put the sketchbook away. Now we're back on the quilt work table. Let's take a look at some of the printouts you can create with EQ8. At the top of the screen, click the Print and Export tab. In the palette on the left, click the Quilt button. In the Print Quilt window, you'll see the options to customize your printout on the left. Notice that the name that we gave this quilt on the note card is here. This name will appear at the top of the printout. If you'd like to change the name, you can click the Edit Name button here and type a new name. This will also change the name on the note card in the sketchbook. Choose the printing style and options you'd like on the left, and then click the Preview button. And here's what our quilt printout will look like. If you're happy with the printout, you can click Print. Or if you don't want to print it this time, click the Close button. Then close again here in the Print Quilt window. Now let's take a look at the yardage. In the palette on the left, click the Yardage button. In the Print Estimates window, you can choose the width of fabric that you'd like to use for the estimate. Or if you just like to use fat quarters, you can check the fat quarters only box. Your seam allowance is here, and by default it's set to the standard 1/4 inch. Click the Preview button, and here's what the fabric yardage estimate looks like. I can click the Zoom In button, and then drag a box around what I'd like to see a little bit closer. Here on the left you'll see the fabric swatch, the number of patches that use that fabric, how many fat quarters you'll need, and the fabric name and designer and SKU number information over here. If you'd like to print this, you can click the Print button or click Close and then Cancel in the print window. To print patterns for the individual blocks, we first need to select a block. Click on one of the variable star blocks, and you'll see that it has a green outline and the finished size of the block appears in a little box. In the palette on the left, click the Rotary Cutting button. In the Print Rotary Cutting Chart window, notice that Use Size from Quilt is automatically selected. If you'll remember at the beginning of the lesson, we set the block size to be 8 inches square. This is still finished block size. You'll notice that it says finished here. So it adds the seam allowance for us. You'll see the seam allowance is listed here, and it's set to the standard 1/4 inch. If you'd like to change it, you can type a new size here. Go ahead and click the preview button. And here you can see what the rotary cutting chart looks like for this block. I'm going to click the zoom in button, and let's take a look at the key blocks up here first. So here we have a diagram of the block with each of the patches labeled with a letter. And if we scroll down, we can take a look at the cutting diagrams for this block. For this A patch, this cutting diagram says that we need to cut a strip of fabric that is 2.5 inches wide. From this strip, we need to cut 2.5 inch squares. We'll need 4 patches of the white fabric for this one block. For the B patch, we need to cut a strip of fabric that is 5.25 inches wide. From that strip, we need to cut a 5.25 inch square and then subcut that square diagonally twice. This will yield 4 triangles. We'll need 3 patches of the white and 1 patch of the yellow. If I scroll back up here to the key block, you can see the B block or the B triangles are here on the sides, and there are 3 white triangles and 1 yellow. If you'd like to print, you can click the print button, or if you don't want to print right now, click the close button. And then click close again in the print rotary cutting chart window. Let's take a look at one more style of printout. This time, click on one of the economy patch blocks in the second border. Remember, it will have a green outline and you'll see the finished size in a box that appears. In the palette on the left, click the Foundation button. In the Print Foundation Pattern window, you can change the way a foundation pattern is sectioned and numbered on the Sections tab and Numbering tab. Because this block is from the library and is already sectioned and numbered appropriately, we'll go straight to the Options tab. Make sure that Use Size from Quilt is selected here, and take a look at the other options that are available. We'll stick with the defaults for right now. Click the Preview button, and here's what the foundation pattern looks like for this economy patch. I'll click the Zoom In button, and again, click and drag a box around what I'd like to see closer. Here you can see that each patch is numbered, so you know the sewing order, and the seam allowance is shown with this dotted seam allowance line. If you'd like to print, you can click the Print button, or you can just click the Close button. Then click Close again in the Print Foundation Pattern window. And there you have it. You've designed your first quilt in EQ8, and you've looked at some of the printouts that you can create with EQ. If you're done working in EQ8, you can close the program by using the X at the top of the screen, or by clicking File. And you can click Exit if you're using a Windows computer, or Quit Electric Quilt 8 if you're on a Mac. Thanks for designing with me.